Elizabeth at A Literary Princess, and today I have my 2023 reading stats for you. So we are going to be looking at first my own personal Google Doc where I keep track of all the books I read and where I have charts and tables that I did not set up. I forget who I got this document from. I think it might have been Elaine Howland over on her blog on WordPress. I'm not actually sure about that. But this is the second year that I've been using this spreadsheet to track my reading, and I really, really like it. We will also then be looking at some of my stats on StoryGraph and at my year in books on Goodreads. So let's jump in. So we are trying something a little bit new here, and I'm recording my laptop screen, which I've never tried before, so hopefully it's working. As you can see, my 2023 reading and books data, I've got this lovely spreadsheet that goes really far down and also really far over. So we've got the title, the author, if it's part of a series, the publication date, number of pages, whether or not it's an arc, date started and completed, and then how many days it took to read, and the rating in stars, the genres, which it can have multiple of, the format, whether or not it's a reread, where I got the book from, whether or not it's school reading, and what country the book is from. So this is all kind of overwhelming, so let's go to the actual statistics tab because that's where it gets a little bit more easy to look at. So we've got lots of tables and charts here, and this first one is just kind of general information. So I read a total of 104 books and also finished a total of 104 books. There is a way to include books that you didn't finish in here, but I haven't actually figured that out, so I'm not, Total pages read is 29,852. Now this is interesting because that is down from last year, even though the total books is up from last year by a few. And I think that's just because last year I was reading, or excuse me, 2022, I was reading for my exams, and I had to read some pretty hefty things for that. And now that I'm not reading for my exams, I am not reading so many hefty things. I spent an average of 8.2 days per book. Some of these books I finished in one day. Some of them took me 60 something. Deathless. It's fine. Average page count is 287, which is again down from last year just because I definitely read more shorter things this year due to not reading for my exams. We'll talk about all that a bit later. Average rating was exactly 4 stars, which is actually up from usual, and again I think it's because I wasn't reading for my exams. Average pages per day, 81.6. There were days I read 0 pages. But it's fine. All right, and then we get into some of these tables, and they have corresponding charts. So we're gonna start with the genres because they're right next to each other and it's easier. So as usual, my highest genre was classics with 33 of them for a total of 31.7% of my reading. That's how it was last year. Classics were my top genre. I think that's probably how it's been every year for the past few years. What's interesting is last year my second most read was nonfiction because of my exam readings. And now we're back to normal with nonfiction being, I read 16 for a total of 15.4%. And my second most read genre is fantasy with 28 for 26.9%. Now that's much more normal for me than the 2022 that had nonfiction almost neck and neck with classics. Like that's just not normal for me. My second most read, okay, so the third most read is actually tied nonfiction and children's, which is interesting because I don't think of myself as reading a lot of children's books, but I read 16 of them. Again, a total of a percentage of 15.4%. This is because in April there was the Picture This readathon, which was all about reading picture books. And then right at the end in December, I reread the Chronicles of Narnia. So that was definitely upping the children's books. And then young adults at 14 and retellings are at 13. That seems pretty normal. A lot of retellings are young adult, so they cross over a lot. And then my least read genres were magical realism, contemporary, and plays, with 2 each for 1.9%. Contemporary is just kind of where I put it when I have nowhere else to put it. So, and then surprisingly, I read 4 books of poetry and 8 romances. That seems like a lot for me, for romances, but okay. So let's look at the books per month. So the table is up here, and then we have the chart here. So as you can see, my top reading months were April and July. April, again, picture this, was helping out real good there. July, I just was reading a lot and having a good time. And my least read months were February and October with 4 books each. February is just a crap month. I feel like I never read very much in February. October was disappointing though, because that's Victober and I love Victober, but well. And then we have the page count distribution, which is its graph over here. So I read mostly in the 200 to 300 range with 20, you know what, it's gonna be easier to look at the table, with 23. And then tied for second place is the 100 to 200 range and the 300 to 400 range. That seems pretty normal for me. I do think usually the 300 to 400 range is the higher one for me, but this isn't completely out of the ordinary. I did read 16 books between 1 and 100 pages, which is interesting. I feel like that's a lot more than normal. However, I was counting a lot of individual short stories this year, and I think that's why that's so high, plus the picture books. And then the longest books that I read, there are 2 in the 700 to 800 category. I usually get 1 in that 800 to 900 category, but it didn't happen this year. And I know the 2 that are the 700 to 800. That would be The Ethelings by Margaret Oliphant, which I read in its original 3-volume edition. So they were each like 300 and something pages. And they're like very, very short pages. I don't really know how to describe it other than that. Like the pages are small in those Victorian 3-deckers. So I think that if it were printed in like a normal edition now, it would not be quite that long. And then the other one is Breaking Dawn by Stephanie Meyer, which just frankly doesn't deserve to be that long because it's a trash book. And that's all I have to say about it. Right, moving on to the star ratings. Here is the graph. So we mostly have 4-star ratings, which is very normal for me. Although there is a good amount of 5 stars, and I feel like that is not quite as normal. And again, it's easier to just read it in the table. So 38 4-star reads, and then 25 5-star reads, which is great. I'm very happy with that. And then no 1-star reads. There were 2 1.5-star reads. That would be Breaking Dawn, again, trash book, and So Happy for You by Celia Lasky, which I knew was bad. I knew both of these were bad when I picked them up. Emma from the channel Emmy had read So Happy For You and complained about it, and I was like, I need to read this now. So it was like kind of a hate read. I liked aspects of it though, hence the half star, but mostly it was just bad. And then Breaking Dawn is just bad. Just bad. But yeah, 5 2-star reads. I'm like trying to think of even what some of them were. I think they were probably mostly school reading books, like criticism and whatnot. But yeah, mostly really high ratings because I know how to pick what I like, generally speaking, unless I'm over here hate reading things. All right, and now we get to some that don't have tables. So for rereads versus new reads, I reread 32 books and read 72 new to me books. Chronicles of Narnia was helping out real good with those rereads there. I would say that's probably about normal. I do love rereading, so I do try to reread a few books every year, or like a decent amount of books. However, I also want to read new books, so you know. Format, this is pretty typical. I read 78.8% in print, which is my preferred format, 16.3% on ebook, so that would be my Kindle, or on the library my university library website, or scanned versions of Victorian 3-deckers that aren't in print anymore, you know. It's completely normal. And then 4.8% on audiobook, which was mostly during my road trip to Niagara Falls. All right, so the source of the book. I have 6 places where I get books from. The first is I buy them. And obviously that's the biggest one. Although this is down quite a bit from last year, and I'm kind of proud of myself. It's usually closer to 50% of the books that I read are ones that I've bought. But it's only 43.3% this year. Then we have gifts, so books that are given to me for my birthday or Christmas, with 19.2%. The university library with 16.3%. The public library with 6.7%. NetGalley with 4.8%, so I get ebook advanced reader copies from them, although I will not be doing that anymore because I hate writing reviews and don't want to do it anymore. And then this other category, free, has 9.6%, and this kind of covers a lot of different things. So if a friend loans me a book, that's considered free. If I read it online on Project Gutenberg or on Internet Archive because somebody scanned the 3-decker Victorian book, that's free. And also books that I just kind of pick up weirdly from places. So books that I get in my English department offices, I just like have books around that we can take for free. That's from there. Books that I say inherited, as I got a bunch of books from my brother, that would count under the free category. Or books that I just, like my grandparents had to clean out their house when they moved into assisted living, and I got some books from there, so those counted. So just like, you know, the random things, they're not really gifts, but, you know, I didn't pay for them. So it's fine. They don't really count if I don't pay for them, right? And then we have ARCs. So I read 5 ARCs and then 99 non-ARCs. So again, I've really gotten out of reading ARCs because I don't want to write reviews. I did read a few, obviously, but there are so many that I had that I didn't read because I'm like, I don't want to write reviews anymore. It's not making me happy. It does not spark joy. So we're not doing it anymore. Right, and then we'll do the school reading first because that's easier. So 29 of the books I read were for school. And, you know, is this kind of a loose for school? Sure. Like if it's by one of my dissertation authors, it's for school, whether I'm using it in the dissertation or not. so it's fine. And then 75 are just because I felt like it. Publication date is super fun. Last year I did it as a bar graph, and I had the 1800s put out by decades because I was reading for my exams and I wanted to see which decade of the 19th century I was reading the most from. This year I did not do that because it was kind of a lot, and I just did it as a pie chart. So we've got the 1600s, the 1700s, and the 1800s all grouped together, and then 1900 to 1969, and then the 70s, 80s, and 90s each have their own. Oh, and the 2000s and the 2010s. And then 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023 are all individual because they're the newer books that I'm reading, and I wanted to see how many from each year. So obviously the biggest category here is the 19th century with 25 books for a total of 24% of my reading. You know. And then we've got 14 from between 1900 to 1969, and I know that 7 of those are the Chronicles of Narnia. The Chronicles of Narnia were just really big this year. The 70s and 80s are probably criticisms that I was reading. Same with the 90s. And then the 2000s to 2023 is where we get most of the non-classic novels, I would say. So I read 8 books that came out in 2023 that were new releases, 6 books from 2022, 4 books from 2021, and 5 books from 2020. And then this tiny little percentage here, my 1 book from the 1600s, that was Twelfth Night by Shakespeare, which I read for Shakestember, and I did not read anything from the 1700s. All right, and then we get to our last chart and table in here, and this is the country of origin, so where the author that wrote the book is from. And yeah, so 51 were from the United States for a total of 49% of my reading. I'm from the United States. Most of the books that I read are from the United States, and if they're not from the United States, they're probably from Great Britain because I am getting a degree in British literature. So 46 books, or 44.2%, were from Great Britain, which includes England, Scotland, and Wales. It's very interesting. It won't take the UK as a country, Google Docs. It has to be put in as Great Britain, and then Ireland is separate. So, okay, it's very interesting. And some countries I couldn't even put in. I tried to put in Dominica because I read Wide Sargasso Sea, and Jean Rhys was born in Dominica and lived there until she was a teenager, but it did not recognize it, and I could not figure out a way to get it to recognize it, so I just gave up. You know. And then 3 books were from Canada for 2.9%, and then we have 1 each from Germany, Nigeria, Ireland, Australia, and Japan. Now, I would love for this to be a little bit more diverse. However, I don't think that's going to happen really while I'm in my PhD program because, again, it's a British literature program. I'm studying Victorian literature. And then most of the criticism that I'm reading about it is written either from the UK or the USA. So I think this is just going to kind of be the norm while I'm in this program. But hopefully once I'm done with the program, I can read more from some other countries, especially I want to read more classics from France and Germany, and I want to read more books from Japan and from Africa and South America and just other European countries that aren't the UK. So yeah, that is my 2023 book spreadsheet and data. So now we're gonna hop on over to StoryGraph and take a look at the stats there. Oh, interesting. They have stats and they have a reading wrap up. Oh, that'll be really interesting to compare. Maybe some with what I've got on Goodreads. That'll be super interesting. Okay, so again, 104 books. I really like this moods thing that they have. I don't always agree with their assessment, but so I've got 34 books in the reflective category, which, sure. 32 in mysterious. Now, you see, that's one that I don't think I would agree with. I know that some of the ones that I read are mysterious, but 32 of them? I don't know about that. 32 in emotional. Yeah, that sounds about right. 30 in dark. Yeah, okay. 29 in adventurous. I feel like any fantasy just gets marked as adventurous, and I don't necessarily agree with that. 14 in tense. Now, you see, I would think tense would be way higher because I feel like I read a lot of tense books. 14 in informative. That would be the nonfiction. 10 in lighthearted. 8 in challenging. Way more than 8 would be challenging. Are those all George? 8. I read 8 George Eliot. No, I read 7 George Eliots. It's just mostly George Eliot. 4 in funny. 3 in inspiring. 2 in sad. I would think there'd be more in sad. And then 1 in hopeful. 1 in hopeful. Look, you know. Oh wait, we can look at the books. Which book is hopeful? The Secret Garden. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, sure. Wait, this is really fun. Okay, what are the ones in challenging? Assembly. Becoming a Woman with Letters. I don't agree with these. I do not agree with most of these. And George Eliot, A Life was not challenging. It was just, you know, a biography. A Sunless Heart was not challenging. Mary Oliver's A Poetry Handbook was not challenging. Sylvia Plath's Ariel wasn't challenging. Where's the George Eliot? What are they counting as mysterious? Okay, yeah, The Shadow in the Glass, okay. The Plot, okay. Twilight's not mysterious. Who's coming up with these? I don't really know if I'd call Deathless mysterious. Same with Frankenstein. The Woman in White, yes. The Goose Girl, really? No. No? Mortal Follies? Not really. Maybe a little, I guess. Sharp Objects? Sure. What Moves the Dead? Yeah. Snow and Rose? No. Deerskin? Some of these are just so wrong. Just Like Home, I agree with that one. Little Thieves? Not really. Okay, I do not agree, but okay. So for pacing, looks like I read mostly medium-paced books for a total of 58, and then 31 slow books and 11 fast-paced books. So we are not doing the fast-paced stuff over here. That sounds about right, to be perfectly honest. Page numbers. We've got 57 books under 300 pages, 33 books between 300 and 500, and then 14 books over 500. Now these I know are not super accurate because I'm not great about picking the exact edition that I'm reading from, so grain of salt with that. 87% fiction and 13% nonfiction. Yep, that's about right. Now the genres, this is interesting. So again, highest is classics with 38. Is that comparable to my classics? So I put 33 for classics, but you know what? I bet Narnia is included in the classics here, and I did not include that in my classics category. 32 fantasy. 12 literary? Really? Because I think I only had like 5 literary fiction on mine. 11 young adult, which I had a few more young adult. 11 short stories, 11 romance, 11 historical, 10 children. So less children's than I put. I'm not going to go through all of these. And this is obviously a lot more sports. That's all for the game. Can we really call that sports, though? It's a fake sport. Like, come on. Reference. Yeah, I'm not going to go through all of these, but it's interesting. One autobiography. I assume that's Margaret Oliphant. That's a bio. I did read Margaret Oliphant's autobiography. This just isn't it. Okay, that was a biography. Okay. I'm not even going to bother looking at the format one because I don't pay attention to that on here. So the most read authors, this is fun. I read 8 books by Margaret Oliphant. I just really love Margaret Oliphant. 3 of them were individual short stories. 1 was a collection of short stories. 1 was her autobiography, and then 3 were novels. I just really love her, okay? And then tied for second place are George Eliot and C.S. Lewis with 7 each. So of course, George Eliot, I'm doing my George Eliot project. And C.S. Lewis, I reread the entirety of Narnia. And then we've also got Stephanie Meyer with 5 because I reread the Twilight Saga and Breaking Dawn. You know, it's fine. And then the other ones are not especially interesting. Number of books and pages is, on the other hand, super interesting because, so we've got April and July as my highest reading months, as we already established, but the page count is so low on April because so many of those were picture books. Whereas the page count and books read are much more even in July because I was not reading picture books. So the ones where it's like exactly equal is June. That's interesting. And then January and February are close. God, screw February though. February sucked. I don't even know what I read in February. And then October, I only read 4 books, but the page count is super high because they're Victorian. The ratings here are also not accurate because I'm really bad at putting in the ratings. So that was just my StoryGraph stats. Here is the wrap up. So my first book was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. My last book was George Eliot, A Life by Rosemary Ashton. Oh, here's my mood map. Lighter books push the line up and darker books pull the line down. Okay, and we're just like, yeah, we're just pretty dark. You pondered thought-provoking themes, unraveled intricate mysteries, and rode a roller coaster of emotions. And most of the stories developed at a steady pace. I don't know what I was doing in January, but we were up pretty high in January and it just went downhill from there. Okay. So we already looked at this. Top genres, we already looked at that. They have my longest book as Romola at 831 pages, but that is not how many my edition has. My edition, even though it is the edition that they're showing, but my edition with notes, and I do include the notes when I am, has 641. So And then they've got my shortest as The Executor by Margaret Oliphant, which is a short story with 21 pages. I don't actually know if that's correct because I have an ebook of it and no way of telling the page numbers. And it's in a bind up of all of Margaret Oliphant's books, or not all of them, but like a good amount of them. So there's no way for me to know. Average length of the books I read was 295 pages, which is pretty on par with what my spreadsheet says. Around 8 days to finish each book. Yep, that's what my spreadsheet says. Least time spent is 1 day, and it just went with fairest, but there were quite a few that I read in 1 day. Most time spent with Deathless with 64 days. Look, I took a break, okay? I started it in September. I took October off for Victober, and then I started it again at the end of November and finished it then. It's fine. And there are my 3 authors. And yeah, again, the ratings are non-existent because I didn't rate them. Most shelved was Twilight, least shelved was The Ethelings. Highest rated was Under Two Flags. Really? 55 new authors. 38 were part of a series. They have me as revisiting 14 books, which isn't accurate because I've only been using StoryGraph for so long. Decided not to finish 17 books. Damn, 17? What? Really? Okay, well, the plot shouldn't count because I DNF'd it and then picked it back up. Same with Under Two Flags. Okay, yeah. Yeah, I did DNF all of these. You know, some I just like wasn't in the mood for, some I just didn't have time for, some I was just like, I don't freaking like this. Some had unnecessary, horrible animal death in the middle of it, dark places, screw that. A lot of them I'm planning to come back to though. All right, so let's see how all of this compares with my Goodreads. All right, so they also have my shortest book as The Executor. Interesting. They've got my longest book as Breaking Dawn, which I think is the actual correct answer, although it's a trash book. Average book length, 288 pages. Yup, pretty on par with what my spreadsheet says and close enough to what StoryGraph says. Most shelved was Twilight. Least shelved was The Equivocal Virtue. It's a biography and critical study of Margaret Oliphant's work by Vanita and Robert Colby. And now they had, yeah, most shelved was Twilight, least shelved was The Ethelings. Yeah, you know. Average rating, 4 stars. That's exactly what it is on my spreadsheet because I am much better about actually rating them on Goodreads than I am on StoryGraph. Although I'm surprised that it's the same as my spreadsheet because Goodreads does not have half-star ratings. Highest rated is The Kingsman on Goodreads, which makes more sense, even though it is not technically a good book. And then I did write a review of Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies because that was an arc. All right, so those are my 2023 reading stats. Let me know down in the comments below what were some of your stats for 2023, and did you meet your reading goals? Did you not? It has been great chatting with you. I will see you soon. Bye.